Hello everyone, so we got this beautiful temple behind us in Thailand. We're gonna see how to take a really professional photo of this, just sort of on the fly. I have very simple equipment with me. I have just a micro four thirds camera, and you're gonna see I can get a really professional result. I don't need a tripod, I don't need anything. I will need a little bit of Photoshop afterwards, so if you have Photoshop, that'll really help. So let's get in there and see how easy this is. Okay, I got my camera here. This is a simple GX85 Panasonic. You're gonna see how well this turns out and how sharp and how great everything looks. The temple is right through there. I went ahead and switched my camera into manual mode, and I'm gonna go ahead and put the f-stop at about f8, okay? So I'm at f8, I'm at ISO 200. I'll go ahead and dial that in, and I put my white balance on a sunny white balance. We can adjust that later, but perhaps more importantly, you gotta be shooting in RAW. So you gotta have RAW so you have that flexibility later. So I'm just gonna get right over here, and I'm gonna get a what's called a 1-point composition here. So I'm gonna try and get as straight on as I can. And we're having to shoot through this fence, but it's not a problem really. So I'm doing my best to line things up, just get everything as straight as I can in the camera. You'll see this. I'll try and get the lines as straight as I can, and then we're gonna try and correct those lines later. You have to correct a little bit because you have to point up a little. So we'll talk more about this later when we're on the computer. But I'm just gonna do my best for now. Just get right in there and get my focus right on that building. And I'm setting my exposure so it's a little bit overexposed because the sun is sort of right behind the building. So I want to make sure it's a little bit overexposed. So we might get 2 exposures for this. And I'm as centered as I can be right there. I'm doing my best, sort of on the fly. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the shot. And it looks pretty good to me. I'll go ahead and review that and just zoom in a little bit. And that looks good to me. What I usually do is I might get one exposure that's lighter and then one darker.
So here we are, and we're in a program called Adobe Bridge, and this is actually free. It's just sort of a file browsing program. It's really great, and you can grab it and put it on your computer for free, which I think is awesome. So as you can see, I took 3 images here. You guys saw me doing that, and the reason is it's really hard to see your LCD screen out in the sun, and there's a lot going on. There's usually a lot of commotion, people, cars, whatever it happens to be. And so it's sort of easy to get frazzled out there. And so it's difficult to, determine exactly so. But the main point I want you to take home is I feel like this is by far the best exposure because in the camera, our main subject is well exposed here. And this is what I was trying to allude to out there where we have a white subject and the camera's metering system, kind of its job is to make things gray. So I knew we were going to have to overexpose a little bit more than the camera's meter was telling us. That's why I said I was trying to get, an overexposed reading on my manual mode there. I was just pushing the meter past that 0 point that you see when you're in manual mode and pushing it to the plus side. I think I went 2/3 of a stop on this one. So that's going to be the exposure we're going to work with. And I remember the sun was up here, but let's just open this up into a Photoshop, and Photoshop has a sort of add-on program called Adobe Camera Raw, and that's where you do all your adjustments. So if you have Lightroom, it's going to be exactly the same. So just follow along. If you have Lightroom, it's really going to be, the controls are going to be identical. So this is Adobe Camera Raw, and we're going to get in here, and the first thing we're going to do, I kind of like the white balance. It's just coming in at default, but I'm going to get this white balance tool up here, and you'll have this in Lightroom. And since it's a white object, I'm going to just white balance off there, and that's going a little bit too warm for me, and this is why it's so important to shoot in RAW. But the main thing we're going to want to take care of here is this sky. You can see the red areas are telling us it's blown out. So I'm just going to pull that highlights slider down. And this is something that's really common for us to do to it's sort of a way to increase our camera's ability to see very bright stuff and very dark stuff. So we maybe pull down the highlights and maybe even pull up these shadows a little bit. And this, you guys have probably, if you into photography at all, you guys have probably been in here before. So you got your exposure you can mess with a little bit, but I think we really got the structure nailed in camera. And I think we're going to end up taking care of maybe the sky in Photoshop. So you'll see how we do that. We'll try and do that as easy of a way as possible. But some of the contrast is a little bit low here, so why don't we zoom in a little bit just so we can see that a little better. I might pump up this contrast a little just so, you know, the photos is about those details. And we might also use some of this clarity, but we don't want to get crazy with it. But I think somewhere in that range is looking good. And I think the vibrance will really help with these doors too. So coming down here, and vibrance is good about, it's not pulling in those blue colors as much. It just seems to be getting those doors to me right there. All right. And we might want to get a little bit of saturation in there. We really want those doors to sort of pop off the page. That's that's really kind of draws people, I feel. So the photo's looking great to me. We might do some sharpening, and so we'll zoom in here to, if you can look at this little number down here, we'll get into 100%. It's probably a good area to do your sharpening in. So it's 67, so we're at 100. And if you can even see that, there's just some little like, just some graininess back there. So we're gonna go ahead and sharpen this. And sharpening sort of works, it's sort of teeter-totter effect. Sharpening and noise reduction, they're sort of fighting each competing forces. And what I did, I just sharpened, that'll make the photo overall sharper. I just raised it up there to 70, and the other default settings are looking good. I put the masking up a little bit, but you don't have to worry about that. But this is the big one down here. Since we've sharpened so much, our noise has actually gotten sharpened. And one way you can take care of this is try and play with this masking. And what that'll do is it'll sharpen the stuff you want to sharpen, but not sharpen that. But we want to just forget that and try this luminance noise reduction and bump that up to 30 or 40. And that noise really starts to go away if you could see that. And you might not have as much resolution, but it's looking good now. So that's an important step. And one last thing you might want to do is jump over here. There should be like a lens, profile. And you want to enable that and maybe find your lens in there and stuff. But I'm going to do this one in Photoshop, but you could just really easily find your make and your model of your lens down here. And what that'll do is that'll take care of the distortion for you, the bending of these lines. Okay, the bending. Sometimes they bend out and sometimes they bend in. But in this case, we're going to take care of that in Photoshop, and I think that's a better way. But you want to remove the chromatic aberration, just check that. And if you want to do an auto version of, we're not going to do it right here. I'm taking you guys like the difficult way, but if you want to do an auto version of what we're going to do in Photoshop, you might play with clicking one of these buttons. It's kind of the automatic verticals. See, it sort of did a pretty good job of fixing everything for me. It looks like it did pretty good. We want our vertical lines to be straight up and down, and we want our horizontal lines to be straight going across too. But I think it's gonna be more of a sort of a good lesson for you guys to see this in Photoshop. So I'm gonna untick that or say do nothing, and we're gonna do that in Photoshop. But I'm just saying, if you guys have a sky already, you just brought down the highlights, you got a blue sky, you played with your sharpening, you press this button, you might be done already, okay? But we're going to get in there and we're going to do the sky, and we're going to do those vertical lines like we just had it do. We're going to do that manually in Photoshop, just in case, because every photo is different. Some of them are going to be easier. When the sun's behind you, it's going to be easier to get the sky in there just naturally with one photo. But in this case, we had... the sky was behind the structure. So it's a lot harder for us to get everything in one frame. So we're going to just do a little bit of digital manipulation, put a sky in there. Okay, so we'll see how all that works in Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and this is not going to get too complex, because I know some of you guys out there are just trying to start learning this, but these are your layers over here. And if you don't see that, you should just be able to find window and then layers, but it's very important. So our document of our main subject is on one layer, right? And so all we want to do is we want to put the sky on another layer up here, and then we're going to be able to just brush that in nicely and just sort of smoothly. So the first thing we got to do is get a sky. So as you can see here, I've shot all these, just, you know, I went out to the beach and shot these, and I know I use these in my, you know, photography. So I have these skies in here, and these are sort of a different time of day that probably shouldn't line up, but that's okay. We're going to pick one of these anyway. Why don't we try this one? Because I remember the sun was up and to the left. We'll just try that one, and you can go ahead, and I shot this in RAW too, so we can go ahead and play with this stuff as much as we want. We can sort of bump up the vibrance in there, and I think what's going to help us is getting a little bit more of on the exposure. So the first thing that might give you problems is you want to get this document over to your other documents. So you just press the V key, or you can run up here and just grab him up there. And what you'll do is just hold down, you just click on this guy and hold down and bring him over. And you're bringing him over to your document, okay? So we don't need this anymore. We have that in our document now. And as you can see, it put that on another layer above our layer. That's exactly what we want. So there's so many different scenarios, and we're going to look at one that works in this scenario. But what I'm going to do here is I got my layer selected right here, the bottom one. You always have to tell Photoshop what you're working on. So I'm working on this photo right here. I turned off this eyeball, and what that does is just makes it so I don't have to deal with this layer right now and look at it or anything. So I have my layer selected, my main photo, and I'm going to come up here and just say select and color range. And you might have to click somewhere up here on the sky, something like that. And see, it's good about reading these color values, not only the color, but maybe the brightness too. And you can play with the fuzziness, but what we want, all you have to think about is you look at this is what's called a mask. It's showing you a mask right here. That's why it's black and white. So another way to put that is all the stuff that's white is going to show our sky. Okay, so we want to show our sky, right? We wouldn't want to see something like this because our sky is going to be showing like in that door. So we click up here, we tell Photoshop we want to show that color. It's picking a color for us. And then we can kind of adjust it with this fuzziness, something like that. And we get it in an area that's looking pretty good, and that looks pretty good to me. So I'll just say okay. And see, it's showing us the selection. And you know, that selection actually looks really good to me. If we zoom in there, you can see it got all around all those little things and stuff. And that's what we want. So the only problem is this won't always work. Like if you had clouds in the sky, it might be a little tougher. But it worked well here, so we can't, unfortunately, we can't do every single scenario. But I'm going to select the top layer now and show it too. Turn on the eyeball and see what it did. Is it just showed me that layer now. Well, we're going to do a thing called a mask here. And it's going to already use our, what do you call it? We call these marching ants, but it's going to use that as the selection for the mask. So you might just have to cookbook this for a while, what I just did here, before you can fully understand it. But I'm just going to click this button. It's going to put down a mask on my layer. And what a mask does, it just shows certain parts of that layer and it hides other parts. So we're going to show all this up here what we want, and we're going to hide all this down here. So we'll click that mask button, and as you can see, it made the mask black and white. So the black is down here on the building. It's a little symbol of what we're seeing over here, and the white is up here. If you want to see your mask, you can hold down Alt and click on the mask, and that's your actual mask right there. Everything in white is showing, and everything in black is hiding, okay? So I don't want to get too complicated here, so what I'd really probably do is come in here and just dodge on this dodge and burn on this mask a little, something like this. So just to get these areas out, because we don't want to see the sky down here, right? We don't want to see this. All I'm doing is just refining the mask that I made. So I think you guys could have used what we had initially, but all I did right there was just clean up my mask a little bit. As you saw before, we were going to be able to see stuff from the sky down here before, see all that stuff down there. We don't want to see anything. We want to block it out with black, okay? So just give that a try. It might take you a few times to really understand what's going on there. But as you can see right now, we've done a pretty good job. I mean, we can see the sky and, it looks pretty good. So we might want to move this sky around though. But we don't want to move our mask. We want to move this guy. So we're going to click this chain right here. And it's going to unlink that. And I'm telling you, don't get too discouraged about this. So I made a mistake there. So I'm just going to undo that. I had to have my photo sky selected, not the mask. What you just saw, I was moving the mask. So I'm going to get the move tool again and just move it around to my heart's content. Can you see that? I can move it anywhere I want. Okay, so that's kind of nice. So I might like this more over here. I might like that, whatever. That's kind of cool. You can see the little pier in the background there, so we don't want that. But something like this might look cool. I'm not going to take too much time on this. You obviously see that you could get really, get the lines lined up exactly how you want. All right, something like that. We'll just go with that, okay? And so I think the easiest way to do this is to go ahead. First, one of the things you might try, because we'll zoom in here, you see it's looking a little bit funky. So one of the things you might try is go ahead and come up here and duplicate that layer. And I realize this might be getting complicated, but sometimes you can turn the bottom of those two to multiply. And sometimes that helps, but it didn't look like that helped that time. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of these and group them into a folder. And that just puts them together. And what I'm going to do is lower the opacity of those two layers in that folder. And what you'll see is, that's nothing. And this is just starting to come in, okay? Starting. And what that does is, all those little problems that we saw before when this was at 100% opacity, it looks funny. If you printed this big, to me, it would look funny. It just doesn't look right. You'd never see a sky that dark and then something like this brightness level. So that's why you can see we're lowering that opacity. It starts to make it much, much more natural, okay? Much more natural. So I'm finding right about at a 50% level is right good in there. And you might want to even... Well, we'll just leave it at that. I don't think we have to get too complicated in the sky, okay? So I'm telling you guys, we're pretty much done. But the last thing we're going to do, we're done now. We're going to hold down Shift, Option, Command, E. And what that did, it just gave us everything you see here, it gave us stamped on the top. So we don't need any of that anymore. We'll keep it, but we really don't need it. Now this is going to allow us to work. This is going to do what we wanted to do before, what the Lightroom was doing, or what it was doing automatically for us. Remember when we pressed that button, it was kind of straightening everything up? Well, you want to get your rulers out and just come over here. See that line right there? You see that over here? It's not straight, okay? So we're going to just have to come up here. And if you do nothing else, do this on your photos. And you want to get skew. So edit, transform, skew. So you can see those lines, though, they're not straight. Like this line isn't straight. So I'm going to zoom out. I have to zoom out just so I can see this. Point this little handlebar up here. And so I'm just going to pull that out until it's looking straight. All right? Just pull it out to the right. And I'll go ahead and zoom in there. See if we can see if it's straight. And it looks pretty close. We can kind of come back in and double check it later on. And we'll do the same thing for these over here. So you got to do the right and then you got to do the left. Okay? And that's looking pretty straight to me too, right there. The door looks like a good one. Yeah, it's looking pretty good to me, okay? So we also want, believe it or not, we're not done yet. I know this is tough. You don't have to do this for your when you're pointed right at the building like this, you got to get these lines too horizontally. So we'll go ahead and try and get that one. And we got it pretty good. You can use these stairs too, like this line on the stairs. And that looks almost like right on to me. You can also use these little pillars over here. These things should all be the same approximate height. Okay, so it looks like it might need to come down a little bit on this side. So I'm just going to pull this handle down just a touch, just barely. And so we're pretty much straight in there. Okay, we're pretty much straightened. All right, so we did that skew. I'm going to press return, and that's going to be it. So I'm going to get rid of all those little lines we had. So just get rid of those. When you're pointed straight at a building like this, it's called a 1-point composition. And I would try and get it as symmetrical as possible. And if you get these rulers out by, I believe, pressing R, you can press the R key, view, and then rulers, Command R, you got to press. You just see I have mine set to percentage, and it snaps over at 50% there. So it's not quite, you can see the door should be right on that line too. So it looks like we need to cut away from this side. Okay, so we're going to press C and grab the crop tool, and we will grab, let's see, original ratio up here. You can do this in Lightroom too, it's probably easier. And what we'll do is just crop down right about like that. I'm trying to get that, and we'll see if that line now, we'll have to accept that. We'll see if that line is in the middle now. So let's get rid of that. So 50%, and it looks like it's pretty close. That one's not in the middle, but that one's, but we're not gonna get too crazy here. So you can see these may be guides too, these little things down here. So that's it. I know that was a tough one actually, because we had to do the sky because we were in that situation where the sun was behind the building. But once you get to this point, you might want to save this because you're starting to learn how to work with these files and these layers now. Yeah. So you're gonna come up here and say save as, and you'll go ahead and save this as a Photoshop document. All right, and that'll save your layers. And so we'll do that right here. We'll just save that as a Photoshop document just to show you how to do that. And so it's saved now. You can see it up there. And the last thing we'll do, but you can't do anything with that Photoshop document, right? You need like a JPEG. So you come in here to File and then Save for Web. You could also do this in Lightroom too. And you want to make sure this is checked, this convert to sRGB. You want to make sure that's checked for sure. And you might want to have your quality at maybe something like 85% for the web. And for the web, usually something in the vicinity of 2,000 pixels or 2,500 will be good. Somewhere like that on the long edge. So we can just say save to that, and we'll check out the result here. So we'll just put this on the desktop and just say save. And why don't we go ahead and get our original document just so we can see all the stuff we did. So we'll save that one for Web 2. So if you can see, that's what we started with in the field, and this was the transformation. So we took care of the sky and we took care of those verticals, right? It's a pretty subtle shift there. It's pretty subtle, but you know, it makes a world of difference in sort of bringing the professionalism to your images. And those are the type of steps you're going to have to take if you want to get more professional work when you're out there and you're traveling. When you get home, shoot raw. Sometimes you might have to sort of monkey with the skies a little bit, you know, play with your contrast and stuff and white balance in the raw processor and get those verticals straight, which maybe we could have even done a better job here, but whatever, that's all right. It's looking great to me, and as long as they're straight, pretty much straight, you're gonna be looking good, okay? Your images are really gonna be jumping up a level. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you get a lot out of that next time you go on a trip or whatever. It's really hard to shoot, on the run a lot of times, but if you realize you can do a lot of the stuff in post-processing, a lot of the fixing, like in this case, we had to point the camera up a little bit. That's why those lines are sort of converging up. So we just fixed that a little bit in post, and it's really quite an easy process to get the raw materials you need in the camera. Like you saw us just sort of running and gunning, shooting through a fence out there. But we're able to get a really nice result, and I've shot photos with this particular camera and even delivered them as professional to clients with this camera. So this file right here would be fine to deliver to a client. I would even say you could print it, okay? Even quite big. All right, so I hope that you enjoy that. I hope you can get something out of that for your next trip and get those photos and get them start looking more professional. So thanks for watching. I will see you next time.